What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Now that's our topic today on Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. This is from a letter that I wrote to my son. Dear Eli, our topic is the importance of a mentor and the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Eli, this is a time of year when people start to reflect on the past and make a resolution for their future. Personally, it's kind of dumb. No, not the reflecting and planning part, that's okay. It's the fact that we rely on the calendar to dictate, via tradition, our actions. Is Valentine's Day the only day that we should say, I love you? Are Yom Kippur or Easter the only days when we should pray and acknowledge our religious piety? We all know that to reflect and plan are smart things to do. Why do so many of us ignore that practice? And this brings me to today's lesson, knowledge versus wisdom. Now let's start with a few simple examples before we get heavy. Now that's a 60s term meaning philosophical. It's not what you mean, Eli, as you gleefully call me fatty. Now when your date asks you as you're driving someplace, Eli, do you need to pee? Knowledge is saying, no, I'm okay. Wisdom is saying, let's stop and find a restroom. Now here's a good quote that says what I mean. It's from Mendel Kalmanson. Knowledge is one-dimensional. Wisdom is multidimensional. Knowledge is the text. Wisdom is the context. Knowledge is learned and processed. Wisdom is experienced and recognized. Knowledge talks and wisdom listens. Knowledge addresses the question and wisdom addresses the questioner. So Eli, when your date asks, do you need to pee? Ignore the text and focus on the context. People listen, but do they comprehend? So Eli, when your son starts to ask you about girls, you may have to dig deeper to find out what question he really wants answered. Address the questioner and not just the question. When your significant other says, we may have some things to do this weekend, recognize that it's going to be a honey-do weekend. Honey, do this, and honey, do that. You get the idea. And when your boss at work says, it might be a good idea to do such and such, guess what? That's more than a subtle suggestion. Now, at the risk of being sexist, I learned a great deal from a book called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus by John Gray. Perhaps the most important nugget that I learned is that when women are describing an issue that they are experiencing, most of the time, they are not looking for a solution. They are seeking a sympathetic ear. They're not looking for advice. Now, when men are describing a problem, they are seeking a solution. My point is that wisdom addresses the questioner and that wisdom is experienced and recognized. Too bad I didn't have all that experience and recognize it before my 2 divorces, huh, Eli? Further, this truth is not limited to gender. How can a suicide bomber justify mass murder and consider it a righteous act? An extreme example, I grant you that, but the point is that wisdom is putting yourself in someone else's sandals, flip-flops, heels, sneakers, wingtips, cowboy boots, or Air Jordans to achieve understanding. Thus, what you know to be true isn't always true. It depends on the footwear of the individual. Now let's talk about mentorship. Here are some quotes to get us kind of started in the right direction. The first three are from a lady named Layla Akita, and she's the author of a couple of books. One is called Think Great, Be Great, and another is called Pearls of Wisdom, Great Mind. And she tells us, I did not know of any single soul who succeeds in life without mentorship. Encouragement fuels great strength and great achievement. And her third quote is, the only way to know is to learn, relearn, and unlearn. Here's a different quote. This is from Eraldo Banovac. There are three characteristics of wisdom: knowledge, experience, and patience. And finally, knowledge is a commodity to be shared. For knowledge to pay dividends, it should not remain the monopoly of the selected few. And that's from a guy whose name I can barely pronounce, Montesam Algarati. Now, Eli, we know that recognized wisdom depends on point of view or perspective. How does one achieve wisdom? The fastest way to becoming wise is to seek out and become a student of one who is already wise. Find a mentor for yourself. The purest form, the purest form of mentorship is the parent-child relationship. Think about it. At birth, every child is a blank slate and a copycat. The parents have the wisdom of achievement in all the relevant functions a child needs. How to talk, how to walk, how to go to the bathroom, just to name a few of the basics. Now, parents not only don't hoard this knowledge, they provide endless encouragement and patience. Their reward is seeing the first step, hearing the first word, and applauding the first solo success in the bathroom. Often, it's even documented in a video or in a family album. Now, as our child ages, he or she will also absorb many of the truths, quote unquote, and characteristics of their parents. Now, these can be both positive and negative. Let's use me as an example. Now, Eli, to my father, your grandfather, a screwdriver was not a tool. It was only a drink. He had zero mechanical skills. He was a strong believer in education and reading. He was a semi-pro baseball player who studied the game relentlessly. So how did I turn out? Well, my friends marvel at my mechanical ineptitude. I've never changed the oil in a car and have no knowledge of how to do so. One of my greatest fears is that something will break that I can't repair. And to be more candid, it goes beyond fear. I did learn from my father, though, how to look like I understand what the mechanic is saying when he tells me what's needed to repair my car. I was told it helps to keep the cost down. That's what I was taught. Now, as for alcohol consumption, my dad would buy a 6-pack at the beginning of the summer and still have 3 bottles remaining from that same 6-pack on Labor Day. I don't like the taste of beer or hard stuff, whatever that is, and my alcoholic intake is limited to drinks with umbrellas or salt around the edge of the glass. Even then, 2 is my limit. Now, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, Papa Av, immigrated to Boston and worked in South Boston as a butcher. He was an extremely prejudiced man. In fact, when President Obama took office, my Aunt Phyllis called to tell me that she was going to go visit his grave to see if he had turned over in it. Now, please don't misconstrue, Eli. I loved your great-grandfather, and he was a wonderful man, but he was very prejudiced. He had 5 children, and they all realized this negative characteristic, and they did their best to not copy it. Now, I'm pleased to tell you that each new generation of our family has made great progress in this area. And I can't tell you how much it pleased me when you, Eli, told me that you couldn't understand why black people were persecuted. Your exact quote was, "Dad, we're all the same. I don't understand." When you said that, it made me feel great to be your dad. Now, your grandfather was a graduate of Boston Latin School and Harvard. Very smart guy. BLS, as he always called Boston Latin School, was the high school where the smart kids went. It was the charter school of its day. I don't believe I need to tell you about Harvard. Now, the number one priority during my public school years was grades. If I received anything less than a B, there was trouble in the house. Anything less than an A required an explanation. Your grandfather was always available to help me with my homework. Sometimes I would get these impossible math puzzles for homework from this one teacher, the one that we used to call Piano Legs. I was usually the only kid that got the right answer because your grandfather was the smartest parent in the class. I was limited to a half an hour of television each night. You might say that reading and education were important in our house. Attending college was a given. Now, Eli, you may remember when we lived in that big house on Knickerbocker Parkway, the huge living room. That's where I taught you how to hit. My dad spent countless hours teaching me to hit and to pitch. He loved baseball, and so did I. His expertise was astounding. He taught me more about baseball than any of your Little League coaches ever dreamed about knowing. He would come to my practices and, of course, to every game. As I got older, basketball became more of a passion for me than baseball. My dad didn't like basketball so much and only saw me play in one game. And Eli, in that game, I fouled out in the first half. That he didn't see me play well in high school is one of my regrets. In my high school days, your grandmother was quite ill with multiple sclerosis, so I understood his unavailability. So, what have we learned? Well, first, find a mentor. In fact, find more than one mentor. Wisdom is taught because he who is wise has experience. The mentor's reward is watching his mentee succeed. For the mentor, giving is receiving. Remember the family album and the videos they take of little kids going to the bathroom for the first time? Remember the three characteristics of wisdom: knowledge, experience, and patience. When you are passionately in pursuit of an outcome, remember to be patiently impatient. Patiently impatient is the blend of patience and urgency. When you are in pursuit of an uncharted goal, dream, and vision, remember that the gestation period is an unknown time frame. Singleness of purpose for achieving your vision requires patience. Wisdom is achieved through failure more often than through success. Once success has been achieved, however, we call the whole process, the failures and the successes, experience. A worthy mentor continuously gives encouragement and feedback. Now, this may come in different forms. It may be a kick in the butt or an expression of disappointment from a respected mentor, and that should be accepted as encouragement. What makes a mentor-mentee relationship great is when the mentee has a failure, and you're going to have failures, my son. Two different feelings are forthcoming. One is disappointment that the objective was not reached. The other is that you, the mentee, let down your mentor. It should be personal and motivating to not disappoint the teacher. The mentor-mentee relationship is unique. It is both more and less than the father and son relationship. The book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is a must read. It's an illustration of that special mentor-mentee bond as well as good financial advice. Remember that once the outcome is achieved, the victory is so much sweeter when it is shared. Wisdom is a commodity to be shared and not hoarded by others, not hoarded to pay its dividends. Now, all my mentors made me promise to teach others what they had taught me. It is your obligation to continue that tradition. Now, my final point about mentorship is to learn, relearn, and unlearn. Now, to learn is the act of listening and accepting through faith the truth of what your mentor teaches you. To relearn is the act of performing the function necessary to achieve the desired outcome. To unlearn is to question the basics by changing the paradigm and perspective, the point of view. Now, just as my dad did not accept the major prejudice of his father, learn and unlearn, I did not accept the minor prejudice of my father. It was incumbent upon me to teach you that prejudice in any form is wrong and unthinkable. As I mentioned earlier, your comments about race were a great source of pride and family reflection for me. However, do not miss the greater point. The changing view about prejudice is merely an example. As times, technology, and society evolve, questioning the basics is an essential vehicle on the road to progress. Old truths, such as the earth is flat, have been proven to be wrong. Learn, relearn, and unlearn, and question the questioner. Knowledge versus wisdom. Now, we have two thoughts for the day. And I quote, this is from Lori Myers. If you want the answer, ask the question. And the other quote is from Himilcius. I hope I pronounced that right. His quote, do question even the basics. You will be a fool for once. If you don't, you will be for a lifetime. I love you always, Dad. Now, the next time we get together, our lesson will focus on knowledge versus wisdom in the business arena. And because we never end a session on a philosophical note, let's get out there and charge! I'm Eli's dad.